Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of Breakdown with the American Legislative Exchange Council. I'm Lars Dalseide, and with me today is ALEC's Communications and Technology Task Force Director, Jake Morabito.
Thanks so much for having me on, Lars. Looking forward to the conversation.
And today's conversation is going to be about AI, now artificial intelligence. Now, we've seen a lot of headlines about this lately, especially with the recent Super Bowl and the Taylor Swift and the deep fakes. But there are a bunch of different entities that are trying to regulate this one way or another. You have state governments, you have the federal government, you have the calls from all the different interest groups. So what are we actually seeing? Who is the furthest right now when it comes to trying to regulate the overall use of artificial intelligence?
I think that's a great way to kind of start this conversation, is to take a look at how much the technology continues to change ever since ChatGPT first debuted to the public back in November 2022. We just earlier this year heard news from OpenAI, the developers of ChatGPT, that they're now working on video generation. So now we're talking about image generation tools, things that you used to have to be a Hollywood director or have some sort of a high production to produce content. Now I can do that in seconds. So this is really kind of changing the landscape, and that initial hype has now come into concrete question and action about what are policymakers and what is the right approach in order to protect innovation while making sure that Americans are protected from any adverse effects.
Now, it's interesting when you talk about that with the image creation side of things, because there's been a lot going on lately with the Google's AI and what they did by way of their image production. They were coming up with these images of people that had no business being in the pictures that they were supposed
Putting it
to
mildly.
be in. And that draws into question about, and I know this is going a completely different area, but this draws into question of, you have people that are creating artificial intelligence and obviously slanting that artificial intelligence just in the pictures, which raises the question of, are they going to be slanting it as well when it comes into just the words, the information that they put out?
Well, it brings the whole experience with Google's Gemini AI model and the stories you're alluding to. It's an important reminder that these AI models are far from perfect. We're not at artificial generative intelligence has a mind of its own and is going to all of a sudden lead to a Terminator type of situation. These models make plenty of mistakes. I would be hesitant to fully replace humans in their work. I think these tools have always been designed from the beginning to augment human workers and make us do better as co-pilots for our daily life, not replacing workers entirely. And that's going to be true with the video generation, and even with the text-based chatbots like ChatGPT and Google Bard and others. They're very impressive at what they do, but they're still fallible, and they're going to need some human oversight.
Well, as I heard a few people discussing it before, when you get down to it, these are just robots. This is garbage in, garbage out. It's only going to be able to do what you program it to do until it achieves a sentient status. But that's a whole nother show we're going to get into. So what are we seeing? What are we seeing at the state level right now? Who's trying to address this with state regulations?
Yes. So first of all, there was a lot of activity in 2023 at the federal level as far as congressional hearings. I think by my count, there were over 40 specific congressional hearings dedicated to artificial intelligence. Now, what has that led to? Not a whole lot by way of legislation. President Biden did issue a sweeping executive order last year, towards the tail of the year, that amounts to the most extreme regulation of artificial intelligence technology we've seen thus far, perhaps next to the EU's AI Act. President Biden, there are some noble intentions there about making AI trustworthy and transparent, but he does do some troubling things there, like invoking the Defense Production Act, which is like, what is this? Why does AI have to do with defense here? People might remember that statute from during the COVID years. And there's some serious penalties from there if companies don't willingly submit their information or be part of these red team safety tests.
Okay, so because we all remember the Defense Production Act. They were talking about, we're going to use this to make ventilators. But there are penalties involved. What are these penalties that could happen if you're saying if companies don't comply in the generation, the production, or whatever of the artificial intelligence?
There could be serious fines or even jail time if the statute is fully implemented. And clearly that's not I don't think that's what they're intending to do, but what that demonstrates is that President Biden isn't afraid to use the big stick of government to make their will on how these models are shaped. Now, at the state level, they see all this federal inactivity, and I think you've seen over 40 different states introduce, not even kidding, over 300 or 400 pieces of legislation on AI. It's such a staggering amount. But I think it's a reflection of how serious this is, and state lawmakers aren't waiting around for Congress to solve our AI issues.
Well, who have we seen lately trying to regulate an AI? Because on the state level, I've seen there are executive orders, and there's also been legislation that has been debated, some's been defeated, and others been passed.
Yeah, some state. Actually, one thing that has pretty bipartisan consensus on is about this issue with deepfakes and impersonating with video or audio or pictures. And this was the situation with Taylor Swift earlier this year, where some consensual intimate images of Taylor Swift circulated on social media. And then there was also this situation where there was a robocall pretending to be President Biden, discouraging people from voting in the New Hampshire primary. So both of those kind of highlighted AI could be used to impersonate people to get them to say things that they didn't actually mean. So in the context of either deepfake child sexual abuse material or those non-consensual images, several states have taken up ALEC's approach, which is let's correct existing laws, use existing frameworks, and clarify that harmful illegal material should still be held accountable under the laws, and then that equips law enforcement to be able to go after these bad actors and protect victims. So you've seen states like Idaho recently. I think it went through unanimously. Pretty much most legislators agree that this is something we can do now that has a practical, tangible effect without limiting innovation.
Okay, so Idaho has put forth some legislation at this point, and my home Commonwealth here in Virginia, I know that the governor has issued an executive order on this.
Yes, Governor Youngkin also taking a good approach here, and he even puts in that executive order, we want Virginia to be a leading hub for innovation. You've seen companies like Amazon and even Boeing in recent years decide to either expand their presence or build their headquarters here, and part of that is because of the state's embrace of innovation and supporting new technologies and the jobs that come with them. So what Governor Youngkin did was, let's figure out, can we apply artificial intelligence to make the government work better? I know I've had to interact with some local and state government agencies, and it's a lot of going on the phone. I feel like I even had to send a fax in 2023 about something. It's like, what is this world that we're living in? So can AI kind of improve processes? Maybe we can, again, supplement the Commonwealth's existing workforce and make them work better for constituents. Let's not limit the private sector's ability to create jobs.
Well, Lord knows if you can improve the overall DMV experience, and that's the Department of Motor Vehicles, not the other DMV up here in the East Coast area. That would be something overall. So, what are the worries though that most people are having when it does come to the overregulation? Because I'd assume that there's got to be a balance between actual control and regulation and then something that's actually going to be stifling.
Right. So you have seen some states, and it's the familiar list, your Californias, your New Yorks, Illinois, Connecticut, some other states kind of introducing more sweeping legislation. The laws I mentioned earlier were kind of taking quick surgical fixes to existing law, which is how it should be. AI is a new technology, but these are often the same problems or similar problems we've been dealing with forever. So we should be going after harmful conduct, not regulating the specific technology. That's going to change day by day as things like video generation come online. But some of these states, they're going after specific high risk, they're calling industries, like let's say healthcare, education, labor, insurance. So they're saying AI should be either heavily restricted or regulated in these areas if they're going to make consequential decisions that are going to impact people in their states. And that sounds great, but what that means is you're going to be requiring businesses to complete a bunch of compliance paperwork, do these risk assessments, which means that's less time they're going to be worried on their customers and actually improving products and making things like healthcare better. And they're just going to be having to complete paperwork and pay lawyers and pay compliance officers to do this work for them. And that's not what we should be doing to business. We should be removing regulatory barriers, not creating new ones.
Well, that's the one thing you can always count on government for, is creating more bureaucracy and red tape. So what happens when a state is going to go ahead and pass some regulations on this, and then we have something big coming down from the federal government? Are we more than likely going to see a different thing state by state, or are people sitting back and waiting for Congress and Senate to act on Capitol Hill?
I think state legislators certainly aren't sitting by and waiting. They aren't trusting that Congress will get their act together. Now, I will say the House of Representatives they just established an AI task force to continue studying this. Again, the U.S. Senate, several senators on both sides of the aisle teaming up on how exactly this should be regulated. Some good ideas, some bad ideas. But I think, just seeing what happened, especially in other technology fights, like with data privacy or with children's online safety, you routinely, again and again, Congress is very good at talking, not a lot of good at turning that talk into action. States, we can actually advance common sense policies that protect the free markets, respect our tradition of limited government and federalism. That's an excellent way for states to be involved with AI, is protect consumers, again, rely on existing regulations. Let's not make it harder for businesses to take advantage of this revolutionary technology.
Now, most of what we've heard about has been the AI that's being created here at home. What do we know about the AI that's being generated overseas, in Europe, in China, in Russia? Anything?
So absolutely, there's our adversaries and our friends are working hard on this technology as well. And that's another thing, is if we follow what the European Union is doing with their AI Act, where you put in this strict regime micromanaging how this technology can be used and where it can't be used, I'm not expecting Europe to be at the forefront of this technology. They're doing exactly what they did with a Web 2.0, and you don't see a lot of the big internet companies of the 2000s and 2010s coming from Europe. They're all in the United States. So we need to be thinking about that. We're at we're at a key juncture here for emerging technology. Are we going to give away our competitive advantage to China and our adversaries, or can we set up another American century of success in technology?
Is there concern overall about what, though, the bad actors in Russia, in China, in some of the Middle Eastern countries? You hear all the time about how there are the Chinese hackers and the Russian hackers and some of the Iranian hackers, and they're trying to get, and I would assume they're trying to do the same thing with artificial intelligence.
And they certainly aren't letting up on the gas either. So, and one thing about the cyber threats that you're talking about is a lot of them, it certainly is true. Artificial intelligence, their bad actors are going to try and abuse this technology, just like they are on this child sexual exploitation front. You're going to have people trying to hack technologies, but you need good AI to fight the bad AI, because we can use artificial intelligence to make our cyber infrastructure more modern, protect our critical infrastructure like our electric grids, and our roadways as we start to have more smart infrastructure on the road. That all needs to be protected. And AI actually allows us to really multiply the effectiveness of those efforts, because as you mentioned, they're going to be relentlessly targeting us. AI can help push back.
Okay, so where are you seeing the best pieces of legislation? What's your favorite so far that you've seen? Whether it's actually down on paper, whether it's been passed, or it's just
I'm partial to ALEC's model legislation. But yeah, I think several states have taken some proactive steps. Like I know Wisconsin and several other states, Texas, I believe, they've at the government level set up AI task forces or select committees to really think strategically and methodically about what does AI mean for our state and the citizens of our state, and especially studying how the government should be using this technology. I think it's a prime opportunity to transform government, and we can do more with less resources, conserve taxpayer dollars in the process. But I think rushing into some of these sweeping legislative proposals, I know sometimes it can be tempting. We need to do something right this second. Typically, you don't get good results from that. So I think the states that are really putting in the work, doing the research, convening stakeholders from across the aisle and across disciplines, they're going to be the ones most informed.
The ones that are most informed. Well, hopefully that will actually mean something this time around. Well, thank you, Jake. I appreciate you coming on with us today to talk about artificial intelligence and the regulations we see going both here and internationally. And come back and join us again for another breakdown with the American Legislative Exchange Council.